residential tech talk, lighting specialist to our residential tech.
Welcome to Residential Tech Talks. I'm Jeremy Glowacki, Executive Editor of Residential Tech Today. On this week's podcast, Craig Spinner joins us from Osterville, Massachusetts, where he is General Manager for Savant Power within Savant Systems Inc. Savant, as most of our audience knows, is a leader in both smart home and smart power solutions, as well as a provider of energy-efficient smart LED fixtures and bulbs through its GE lighting brand. Savant Power Systems provide homeowners with visibility into their energy production and consumption, help them weather power outages, and offset peak utility rates when on the grid or optimize energy usage when off the grid. Last month, the company acquired POMCube Inc., which has been at the forefront of developing and deploying energy storage solutions for the past 10 years. I've known today's guest probably for as long as Savant Systems has been in business, but this is the first time having him on the podcast. With hot summer weather upon us and hot news from his company in my email inbox, I thought it was a great time to have Craig on to discuss residential managed power and Savant's growing slate of solutions. Craig Spinner, great to see you again. Welcome to the podcast.
What an introduction, Jeremy. Thank you, and great to be here. Maybe next time we could do it in person, but I've been paying attention to your podcast, and it's a pleasure to be on.
Well, great to have you. And as I was preparing, I had obviously memories of crossing paths over the years, and having different events and visiting there in Cape Cod and all that. But one of the things I did not realize about you when I looked up some information on LinkedIn was that you were an English major in college. And, me being a journalism major, I was close to that. I honestly, if I really wanted to go where I wanted to go, it would have been English for my major as well. So had I known this about you, I think we could have had a different conversation years ago about what you were going to go into. What were you going to be when you grew up, when you were an English major? What was your plan?
Yeah, no, cat's out of the bag, I guess. We work with, and you certainly speak to and write about, entrepreneurs and engineers and innovators. But there is a great use of folks like us, English majors, folks who can bring some sensibility and some, I'd say, you can read, you can write, you can communicate. So all these things are incredibly important as we look to drive technology forward. So to answer your question, I was going to pursue a law degree. My father was an attorney in Connecticut and at UConn, which I am an alum of UConn. So that was the foundation of potentially a law degree. Life and things happen, and next thing you know, I'm graduating and working in the tech industry. My first job out of college was working for our founder, Bob Madonna, in this crazy startup called Savant. So I was thrown to the fire and quickly, learned and adapted around this CD industry, which has been evolving, every step of the way. And it's been a great opportunity to watch CD evolve and innovate. And hopefully companies like Savant have brought, new business opportunities and stability as the world of tech is evolving. So I guess that's my story on being an English major and where I was headed. But as we know in life, there are curveballs and different routes we certainly take. So,
well, my daughter's going to be a senior in high school this year, my oldest daughter, and figuring out a major is not. It's not been an easy one for her, and that kind of helps you pick a school when you know what your major is. I was fortunate. I kind of knew where I was headed with journalism, but like I said, English would have been fun. I also thought about film studies and things that weren't too practical, but the idea that you can go into anything when you have an English major kind of gives me some ideas for her. Because you went into marketing for a bit there with Savant, correct? Like that kind of fits a bit more on where that English major might be helpful, getting the word out on a company and explaining things in a way that is good language as opposed to engineer speak and that sort of thing.
For sure. And that actually reminds me, I still keep in touch with UConn, and I actually had the opportunity to speak to some of their entrepreneurs, or they have this entrepreneurial kind of segment of the university. And one of the topics was, well, speak to me about your major and how that could fit into the entrepreneurial program. And you kind of said it best, where it's, being an English major, it's a good foundation, stepping stone for a lot of different careers: journalism, marketing, business. So with anything you do in life, having the foundation of being an English major certainly will help. Even in high tech, Jeremy. So here we are now.
Well, when you first stepped into your role there for a tech company, what were some of those early lessons, and what were the hard things to kind of grasp, not coming from the engineering side, but coming from the, more liberal arts side of things? Was there a learning curve early on for you as you got to know the company as it was getting started?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think personalities are certainly something that we all face and have to adapt to in the business or businesses that we have the opportunity to work for. So I think learning to work with what I deem engineers are very black and white, right? They have very specific things and tasks they have to do, and we, in more the liberal side or liberal arts side of the equation, we have a lot of gray. There's a lot of opportunity to think differently and to have, I guess, put a little spin on how we approach communication and our job. So being able to work with certain A-type personalities that are very uniquely positioned to drive product and focus on getting deliverables done, and then us on the other side trying to sell it and to spin it and to ultimately package it up to the customer. So I'd say learning curves for me was certainly being able to work with a different subset of talent, and then coming into CEDIA or the CI industry, mm-hmm. I'd say there was a learning curve there. It was, and it still is, a close group of industry professionals, whether it's on the manufacturer side or the installer side. So being the new guy on the streets or new gal on the street of the road, having to crack into a pretty close-knit community was definitely a learning curve. And it was super fun. And once you're embraced, whether you're a new installer or a part of the manufacturer's group, it becomes like family. So I think that certainly, the personalities and learning a new industry was part of the curve here of learning for me.
And those early years, obviously, and we're going to get to Savant Power because that's really what the focus of our conversation is today. But those early years of the company, you were working on home control. There were existing players in the channel doing that. The unique aspects that I can recall from that time period, that the connection to Apple was a big one for Savant. So maybe you could just, for folks who maybe are new to the industry or just haven't really been that well versed in the history of certain companies, and Savant in particular here, maybe you could just kind of give a quick little summary of that origin story from Bob Madonna, your founder, who you've been there with since the beginning, how he came into the industry, how he was trying to solve something for himself personally and saw it as a business opportunity as an entrepreneur.
Sure. That's actually will be another great segue into Power, because very similarly how he started Savant in Control is a very almost the same story as how he got into Power. So I'd say way back in the early 2000s, as Bob exited telecom after a very successful career and building a company from the bottom up with a credit card and a dream, bootstrap it strapped XL switching and grew to be, a very successful, innovative company that really took the deregulation of telecom, took an opportunity to drive innovation when the big telecom companies broke up, and essentially invented the soft switch, which was utilizing hard switches and software and the cloud to create applications and drive applications. And back then, things like voicemail, fax machines, ATM technology, things that we take for granted today. Don't know if you still fax or have a beeper, but I think we've evolved since then. So moving on. So when he exited, he got a place in New York City, and he wanted to outfit his apartment with the latest tech, from TVs to speakers, control system, lighting. And he, as a technologist, he quickly realized there's a software programmer that is writing code to put one button on an antiquated touch panel to turn on my television. So both from how systems were configured to the user experience of smart home back then, he quickly realized there's a better mousetrap. So he approached the market from a consumer, from a technologist, and from a businessman. So he kind of brought back the band after XL switching was sold. Some of his business leaders and key engineers were off doing other things. He said, "Hey, let's get back together and revolutionize, at least bring a new approach to the smart home, or home automation as we referred to it back then." I don't think smart home was even a word that we used. So moving forward, what he built was a simple way to configure complex systems without low-level code, and we coined that Blueprint. And we used, to your point earlier, the Apple platform as our baseline, both from a configuration environment, which we still use today. The Blueprints still run on a Mac, and on the core processor to drive a very rapid, reliable smart home system. And back then we used Mac Minis, which we still use today. And now there are some very powerful Mac Minis that have grown. So the foundational pieces and parts of Savant are still there. Obviously, the advent of the iPhone and the iPad and the cloud technologies, we've moved on from a user experience. From now we're voice. Now we're AI is becoming a big part of this. But the core foundation of building a great user experience and having complex systems configured simply is at the foundation of what Savant still does today. So what's interesting, and I think it's a good transition into power. So as you may or may not remember, Bob stepped down as CEO of Savant for a bit of time. Still the founder and the owner, and he wanted to put solar. This is 2014ish. He wanted to put solar and was investigating battery backup back then. And he quickly realized, if I can't automate the power, especially at a load level, that I can't really maximize these two renewables to work together seamlessly. So he started a company called RacePoint Energy, which was a sister company of Savant for many years. And he hired very talented engineers and folks who were well-versed in energy, and built up what we have today. And we have a lot more which we can talk about. But our power module is a smart companion breaker module that can snap into any standard electrical panel, that can essentially make those loads, or any load in a home or light commercial property, smart. And what does that do? Well, not only does it give the end user or property owner revenue grade energy monitoring and management, you can see how much you're consuming, but allows you to dynamically control, shed, turn on loads at any time. So when we are talking about renewables, so solar panels and now, storage systems or battery backup are really growing. Back then in 14, batteries were expensive and big, and the market wasn't quite right, but solar was certainly taking off. Now you can, by controlling the loads, you can maximize and extend the life of a battery. So I like to think of it like if you have a generator in your home, the electrician says, okay, the generator is outputting this much power. You get a fixed critical load panel, and you basically are subjected to whatever loads you choose based upon the output of that generator. In our world, in our philosophy was any load could be smart, or any load could be accessed at any time. Our software is smart enough not to exceed the output of both, a generator or a battery inverter, but it allows you to access any load at any time during a loss of power. Or, if you want to maximize energy use and lower your cost of energy consumption, you may want to shed certain loads at certain times of day. Peak hours, especially between 5, and 7 p.m., energy is costly. So, our system now through load management can start to shed certain unwanted or unused loads to maximize the efficiency and cost of energy in your home. So, coming full circle, again, Bob looked at energy back then as, hey, I'm a consumer, and there's got to be a better way or better opportunity for me to realize the benefits of a solar system or battery. And then as a technologist, he saw the gap in electrical panels, which still today predominantly are antiquated. I'm sure if you've gone down your basement before, maybe you have a Savant load management platform, so you don't have this problem. But if you lose power or something's tripped, you're down in the basement with the flashlight. You open up, whoever the last electrician wrote something in pencil, so you kind of figure out what load that is. So ironically, one of the most foundational pieces in your home is the most antiquated. And Savant's mission in 2014, and still is today, is to transition and the electrical panel and make it smart, because power is going to be and is such an important part of the smart home. So the similarities between how we started, Savant back then are very similar to how we started RacePoint Energy, which, moving forward was a sister company for a while, and we ended up purchasing it officially under Savant Systems Inc. And now we renamed it Savant Power.
Well, we will continue our conversation with Craig Spinner after the break. Today's episode of Residential Tech Talks is brought to you by NICE, the global manufacturer of smart home security and building automation solutions. NICE is bringing together 30 years of innovation with award-winning products from ELAN, SpeakerCraft, and Panamax to create a holistic ecosystem for builders, integrators, and consumers. Learn more about how you can create one home with one solution at go.niceforyou.com/RTT. Welcome back. We're talking with Craig Spinner, GM of Savant Power. And Craig, you were making me flash back to a visit. I was invited out to your headquarters on Cape Cod and saw the early prototypes, I think, of those modules. And you've already done such a better job of helping me understand it, even though I kind of didn't do my homework now. I understand what it is, and I've learned a lot more about smart energy. But back then, it was such a new concept, and poor Bob was trying to explain it to me. And of course, he was knee deep into it, from the beginning. And it was so hard for me to grasp things that were in an electrical panel when I was so used to talking about home control and, TVs and speakers and all the entertainment type technology that we've always grown up with CI. So this is a whole new category. I'm sure that early on it was a bit of a challenge, even for those professional integrators to wrap their heads around and what their opportunity was. So I'm sure there's been a lot of progress since the early first steps. But how have the Savant dealers embraced the idea of working with that panel or working with an electrician to get that panel to become smart?
That's a great question. And, what we like to say, even back then, but more so now, there's two worlds colliding, right? There's kind of this low voltage and high voltage world. Whereas I would like to not everybody, of course, in the CI space is just focused on low voltage, but that's their bread and butter. It's AV, it's control, right? It's networking, and then you've got the high voltage world. And if you're talking about that in the renewable space, that's solar and battery and generator. Very rarely, even to this day, do these two worlds collide. They're starting to overlap, and we feel like we're in the center of it.
Okay.
When you have a platform that can transcend with the same software and hardware and user experience, which is certainly the cornerstone, that can transcend both arenas and bring them together. So the high voltage folks can now participate, obviously in the Savant Power, which can be a standalone system, but now can participate in smart home because Savant allows you to add that to a power only system. Vice versa, and more important to, I think, the audience here, is pulling in Savant Power and power solutions to what we do every day, which is smart homes and smart entertainment. So it bridges the gap and brings another opportunity to sell something that is not a separate subsystem. It lives within the Savant environment. So, back then it was certainly a new concept. And trying to get the dealer's head around what's coming. I think that's where Bob has always been, which is a few steps ahead of when things start to explode in terms of market awareness. So we as we were refining the technology throughout the years, and thus trying to open the installer or dealer's eyes as to why you should automate power at the foundational breaker level. Next thing you know, renewables are exploding. So it's been a nice trend. Whereas we had some early adopters for sure, but now, Jeremy, you can't. Dealers cannot pretend that they can not pay attention to what's happening, and especially whether it's climate change, whether it's the rise of energy costs, whether it's prolonged outage of power, the rise of renewables. So we're in a place and time where, as business owners in the CI space, we have to embrace this industry and monetize on it as well. Yeah. These dealers have such a captive audience of customers, whether it's in California or Texas or Florida, New England, that are installing solar panels, are interested in battery backup. Why not introduce that on top of what you're already putting in the house? And not to speak solely on Savant's behalf, but when you have that same platform, the same configuration environment, the same user experience, the extension of that app from audio to video to lighting, now to power, makes it a lot easier. And you have the trust of Savant behind you and the support of, our support of the dealer base, which we've been providing, I think, at the highest quality for the last almost 20 years. So I think we're at this point in time where the adoption of smart energy in our CI channel is going to be explosive. And I would ask all dealers to not just Savant, but embrace it. Take advantage of it now. Be a part of this growth, especially with the passing of the Inflation Reduction Act in August of last year. Now there's even more incentive for the customer to take advantage of renewables, whether it's tax credits or rebates based upon there's a high efficiency homes rebate, which gives monies back to the consumer if they update their electrical panels. So we won't get into all the details there, but the point is, I think now is the time for this industry to take advantage of what's already happening and embrace kind of the final pillar of the smart home, which is smart power.
And so I understand the interface aspect of this a little bit better because we've talked a little bit more about hardware. When you have a Savant Power installation, you've got a solar setup. How much work goes into that interface, the programming of when how much is automated, how much is user controlled, question, do you want to shed this load? And how much can you simplify that for the homeowner so that they're getting the most out of their renewable resource there and handling the grid properly, timing it when rates are high or low and that type of thing?
Sure. No, that's a great question. I think that there's two parts of that. One is, how do we handle the installation configuration for the installer, and how does that transcend to the end user app? So I mentioned Blueprint, which is still a core foundational configuration tool for smart systems from Savant and now Power Systems. So you can drag in your battery inverter and other renewable devices into Blueprint and make the configuration happen. But more importantly, I think what's more exciting is the Savant Power and Light app. So there's a new configuration tool that enables both, whether you're in CI or the renewable space or an electrician, to have a very simple onboarding process in your phone through the app, where you can discover and onboard both battery inverter that Savant manufactures. We do control a few others, and plus onboard the load management, right? So you can quickly snap in the power modules, which are 20, 30, and 60 amp, can support those loads, and you can configure them with this app. So this allows for a much easier and quicker process and not relying upon the Mac each time, especially for power only systems. And when you're doing that, Jeremy, in the Savant Power and Light app, you can also set up some modes or scenes that the end user can participate in. So, for instance, eco mode is something that we generally run, or it's a mode that is generally just run throughout the day, which is really taking advantage of what we talked about. Certain times of day, energy costs are high, and that's when I want to draw from the battery, right? That's when, from let's call 7 to 10 a.m., when people are home getting ready for work, and kids are maybe watching some television, and maybe I'm charging my Rivian or Tesla or Ford F-150. I don't want to be paying energy costs from the grid, so I want to draw from my battery at that time. So our system can set up in a way where any load that you want to be powered by that battery during that time period is set up. And then let's say between 10 and 4, maybe I'm recharging my battery. Energy costs are lower. So when folks come home and kids come home or whomever, now I'm going to go back on drawing from that battery. So I'm maximizing time of use. So that's a mode that could be set up by the installer and also activated at any time by the consumer. And as you know, Savant scenes were one of the foundational cornerstones of our innovation and still remain today. Our ability, or the end user's ability, to capture any setting that's happening in an environment, whether the lights are perfect, the climate's great. Monday Night Football is on ESPN, and I'm capturing that scene, and I can repeat it anytime I want, or it can automatically activate during a certain time of day. That cornerstone technology on smart homes is being brought into Power. So it's a nice transition from, again, it's similar things. You're just controlling certain modes of certain pieces of technology, but allowing the user to do that in an elegant way. So Savant scenes are now transcending into Power. But now we have, I can activate a Power scene that could be inclusive of lighting and entertainment. So again, we're kind of just bringing this last pillar into the ecosystem and truly making what we believe an automated home come to life. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. It does. It sounds like it would be very intuitive for an integrator to work with their partners in that process. And so, and then you've brought in more hardware into the company. For example, the POMCube acquisition that I referenced at the beginning. This is a company that has energy storage systems in their arsenal, and you've now brought that in. So had you had your own ESS solution in hand, or were you just partnering with other companies until you acquired POMCube?
Yeah, great question. So we had some partnerships prior to the POMCube acquisition that we were, validated and made sure we're up to our spec and standard and reliability. And we were offering packages to our installers, for about a year and a half, almost 2 years. And it was great run and super successful. But as you can imagine, our founder was chomping at the bit to have more, no pun intended, control over the technology. And we found this company, POMCube. It's been around since 2014. Really great tech, and what we are looking for, and what's really important, is of course we want to be part of the solar installer market and channel.
Mm-hmm.
They're generally not doing full whole home backup. They're adding, I'd say, a modest battery inverter to a solar system across the masses, because now these systems can be financed in some cases, leased or loaned, 25 years, right?
Mm.
But what was important is that we chose a solution that can be scalable to meet the demands of some of our more discerning clients in the CI space. So we can support, and what POMCube is offering us is scalability from a 200 amp to 400 to 600 to 800 amp system with a ton up to 200 kWh of storage. So it's truly full whole home backup for an extended period of time. Couple that with load management, you can start to extend that even further. So we wanted to ensure that the technology, most importantly, was sound, and POMCube had some great tech. They just needed, a brand and some, a step forward in terms of some of the user experience. So that's where we come in. We're taking a great platform that was already built. I like to say we're savantizing it now, and we're. So it's been super exciting. The two companies are working closely together. We look to go on pre-sale on our Savant store in the next couple of weeks with our initial offering, and then looking to ship these systems out in Q3. So that's kind of the origin of POMCube, and we're delighted to have this company part of Savant, and for Savant to take its next step in the power world. So now we can say we're a full turnkey power system, right? Which is, I think, unique compared to virtually any other company on earth. Think about it. We have a battery inverter. Okay, check. We have a load management built into the cost of the battery inverter. No one can say they have as sophisticated of load management in their offering. We've got a level 2 EV charger, but we have what's, I think, most unique to our audience, which is the ability to now bring smart home to power. So we think we've identified, a market offering that is unique enough to enter in. We always felt that you can't just enter into this battery inverter industry, without having truly something unique, innovative, and it sets you apart. And we think we're onto something, and we're very excited to be selling these systems to our dealers, and of course to some other channels out there.
Well, I know you've got a lot of work ahead of you there. And you mentioned before we started that you're starting to talk to the solar panel installers as well, because you need everyone to be aware of your brand and your opportunities there, whether it's on the CI side or the solar panel side when you're talking power. So it's exciting. It's great to see such a comprehensive solution coming together for the company. And really appreciate your time today, Craig. It's been great learning more about it. And hope you have a great summer and continued success. And I look forward to seeing you in person at CEDIA in September.
It's a date. Thanks, Jeremy. I really enjoyed this. And like I said, I'll see you in a couple of months at CEDIA.
Great. Sounds good. Craig Spinner is GM for Savant Power at Savant Systems Incorporated. You can learn more about his company's complete energy management solutions and more at savant.com. And that wraps up today's show, which was produced by Residential Tech Today, IPW, and Pretty Easy Podcasts. Please check out prettyeasypodcast.com if you want a professional and affordable production help on your own podcast. And if you're new to Residential Tech Talks, please subscribe to our weekly podcast wherever you listen or watch this episode. Also, check out all the latest residential tech news at the magazine's website, restechtoday.com, where you can also subscribe to the print or digital magazine and to our Tuesday and Friday email newsletters. Until next time, please stay safe, stay inspired, and let us know if you have a great story to tell.
Residential Tech Talk, autonomous lighting specialist to Residential Tech Talk.
Home automation, smart device, home or smart house.